Marketer of the day, number 506. The one thing and the domino effect. Think big, act small, get clarity on priorities, time block, and simplify with Geoff Woods. Hey everyone, we're so glad you're listening. We have a celebrity in the house today, and his name is Geoff Woods. And Geoff is the vice president of The One Thing, and he hosts the One Thing podcast, which is in the top 5% of all podcasts in the world. And after hearing the Jim Rohn quote that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, Geoff set out on a mission to surround himself with high-level CEOs and successful entrepreneurs. And now you fast forward just 10 months, and Geoff went from employee to entrepreneur, launching a company with the co-authors of the best-selling book, The One Thing. And Geoff has been featured in Entrepreneur.com and is on a mission to teach people how to take back control of their time and get clarity on how they want to invest it. So that sounds like a great message. Lots of great stuff to unpack and talk about. So Geoff, glad to meet you here.
Thanks so much, Robert.
So you've had all the success. You partner up with the One Thing guys. So what is on your mind lately? What has you fired up?
What has me fired up lately is seeing the momentum that's picking up in our business. In the book, The One Thing, there's this idea of the domino effect. And for anybody who's ever been listening to this, if you've ever lined up dominoes, did you knock them each down individually? Or did you line them all up, you knock down that lead domino, and that lead domino unleashed an effect that knocked them all down? What we know is that this domino effect in our life, when you start knocking the dominoes down, it just goes for a while. But over time, when you keep knocking that lead domino down, all of a sudden you experience hockey stick growth, whether it's in your life, your business, your relationships. And we're finally at that inflection point with our business where we've been knocking the right lead dominoes down for a long time, and we're starting to see that hockey stick growth.
Well, great. And what does that hockey stick growth look like for you guys?
Multiple folds. First and foremost, you have to take a step back and understand why we're even in business. Gary Keller, who's my partner, he started a company called Keller Williams Realty. It's now the largest real estate company in the world. He scaled that from a small little company in Austin to now #1 in the world. He's truly a titan of his industry. He looked at what the surprisingly simple truth was behind his extraordinary results, and he wanted to share it with the world. That's where the idea for The One Thing came. And then my partner, Jay, is Gary's co-author. The book is now one of the highest rated business books of all time. And they realized this was just the beginning. There was an opportunity to serve people to a much higher level so that they can take back control of their time and have clarity on how they want to invest it. That's my job, to turn the book into a big business. And for years, we have been focusing on training the individual, whether that's through free tools like our podcast, our blog, or whether it's through premium tools, whether it be a membership platform or master courses. And it's getting to the point now where Fortune 100 companies are reaching out to us and saying, hey, what does this look like to roll out for 20,000 employees? Because I think all of us have had that experience where you worked really hard all day, yet you looked up at the end of the day and you thought, I know I was busy, but I didn't even get anything done. And that's the problem that we solve.
And how is that problem solved?
It first and foremost starts by looking at all the things that you could do. Every single day, we wake up with this laundry list of things that we need to do. And because we're the type of people who want to take action, we just want to cross things off the list. What we've discovered is that most people do the things that are easy to do because it feels good to cross that thing off your list. You actually get a dopamine release in the brain when it happens. What happens, though, is that you're not doing the things that actually move the needle. Have you ever heard of the 80-20 rule, Robert?
Of course.
Yeah, so the idea that 80% of your results come from just 20% of your activities. What we teach people to do is to get clarity on their priorities. The very few things that if you just knocked those dominoes down would unleash the majority of the growth in any area of your life. And how do you protect your time? We call it time blocking, so that you are doing your most important work first. Because if doing the most important thing is the most important thing, why would you do anything else?
It makes so much sense when you put it that way, and I can definitely empathize with people and understand that maybe some people get trapped in the wrong thinking of, like you said, wanting to scratch off the easy tasks and say, oh, I took out the garbage, great. I printed new business cards, great. I cleaned my desk, great. Which, like you said, it gives you the dopamine release, helps you out with the biology there. But then when it comes to actually making money, doing what's important, making use out of the limited time we all have throughout the day, not really a good solution. And so you're saying that we need to get clarity on our priorities. So strip away what's not essential and time block. And so what does that look like with people typically? Like, are people usually just like totally scattered, and maybe they resist things that are just time wasters, and they resist delegating maybe?
Yeah. So what I see a lot of people doing, and this is when we go into corporations and we really talk to leadership and talk to employees. Most people, when they get to work, they open up their computer, and what's the first thing that they do?
Probably email or Facebook, right?
There you go. They check email or they check social media. Now, let me ask you a question, Robert. Is checking email or being on Facebook the one thing that, if you could only do one thing, the one thing that would unleash the majority of results in your business?
Heck no.
No way. In fact, when you go into your email inbox, what you're subconsciously saying to the world is, I don't know how to do my job, so I'm going to let you drive my activities for the day.
That's pretty scary.
Yeah. I mean, if we were to follow people around with a camera and just document their every move, even though they would never consciously say this, they go through their days doing all the things that don't really matter. Email, sitting in meetings, saying yes when people ask if you've got a minute, and hope to free up time to do the things that matter most. They go through the day doing all the things that don't matter and hope to free up time doing the things that matter most. And I learned this lesson the hard way. So if you are listening to this, you're going, wow, I do that. Take yourself off the hook. It's not your fault, because you were never trained in this, and neither was I. I was in medical sales before this job. I never received extraordinary training on how to manage my time. And all of a sudden I'm put in this position where I'm asked to become the face of the brand and turn this into a training company. I remember early on sitting down with Gary Keller and Jay Papasan, my partners, and presenting them with my vision for the company. And I handed them each a single sheet of paper, a one-page business plan. It had a goal at the top, our goal for the year, and it had the three priorities, the three biggest priorities that if we accomplished these three things would allow us to achieve our goals for the year. And they were in order of priority. Gary and I started talking about number one. Jay and him asked a bunch of questions. I answered them. I said, are we good? They go, yeah. I moved on to number two. About halfway through number two, Gary starts asking more questions about number one. I didn't think anything of it. I just answered the questions. I asked, are we good? He said, yeah. I finished up number two and started talking about number three. And pretty quickly, Gary starts asking more questions about number one. At this point, I'm realizing that something's going on and I'm just clearly not understanding what's going on here. But I answered the questions. I said, are we good? They said, yeah. I'm talking about number three for no more than 10 seconds before Gary stops me a final time. He asks, do you need to do number three in order to do number two? I said, no. He said, do you need to do number two in order to do number one? I said, no. He said, well, then do me a favor. Put a line between number one and number two, or even better, just rip the page in half. Don't even think about number two and number three until you've earned the right to by mastering number one. Because if doing the most important thing is the most important thing, why would you do anything else?
That's pretty deep.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like this massive accountability 2x4 to the face. And it was so profound because I realized I was telling myself this story that I've got all these major initiatives and I've got to advance the ball on all of them. But because I was dividing my focus, I wasn't actually finishing anything. And the one thing that I really needed to do, that I could do, that would make everything else easier or unnecessary, I was not giving my true focus. And this is the number one lie of productivity. It's people walk around treating everything like it matters equally. Checking email does not matter equally to engaging with your customers. Being on social media does not matter equally to developing that next product for your organization. Helping the person when they stop by and say, do you got a minute, does not matter equally to you sharpening your own skill set so that you can continue to drive more value. Yet how many of us say yes to all those things that don't matter as much first and say no to ourselves?
Way too many of us, way too often.
Well, there you go. So when you ask what gets us excited, we're solving a real big problem. We're solving the problem of time. helping people take back control of it and have clarity on how they want to invest it. And now you have a deeper understanding of what that actually means.
Yeah, yeah, and what I'm hearing a lot of is that maybe the way that we perceive ourselves and the way that we perceive our actions is totally inaccurate. That we think that we sit down, we bang a bunch of stuff out, and oh yeah, sure, I can have my email open and social media open, and I get this other stuff done, and I can be in the groove, and I can let someone interrupt me and switch back to it. But then when we look at what actually happens, like you said, if we had a video camera recording actually what we're doing with all this multitasking, we're not getting stuff done, we're just putting out fires, we're letting the smallest things distract us. And I can definitely relate to this. I mean, there's definitely, I mean, as you know, like the productivity muscle kind of comes and goes, and sometimes we get stuck in a rut and have to relearn those good habits. But I think about times when sometimes I get burned out, or I get spread too thin, or I let things get too complicated or too much multitasking, and I have to get to the point where I size my monitor down really small and I just record my screen. And as silly as it sounds, just the fact that I'm having like some kind of a record of what's going on, even though the recording's just for myself, it gets my butt in gear, and it gets me to let go of those many lies that I tell myself, where I think I'm getting all this done when I'm actually not, because the camera never lies, right?
There you go. There you go.
Goal craziness. So, all right. So I mean, what's the lesson to be learned in that story with the three things that, so if the, number three does not rely on number two, and number two does not rely on number one, so let's just draw a line, or tear the page off. I mean, what does that mean exactly? Does that mean that they wanted you to get number one completely knocked out and don't even think about two after that, or like what was the outcome of that?
Yeah. So if you live in a vacuum, then you get to completely focus on doing number one and not do anything else. Now we acknowledge that we live in a real world. We live in a world where if you work inside of an organization, there's competing priorities. It matters to be a team player. There's political implications if you just stop showing up for all meetings. So I mean, I'll be transparent right now. The fact that I'm even on this interview right now, I am choosing to act it out of priority. Now, pay attention to the words that I just used. The one thing that I should be doing right now, I'm missing a person. I need somebody who can come in as a community manager and really create amazing content, engage our community, and manage the content process. I'm looking for that person. And anything that takes my focus away from that is actually a distraction at this point. Yet, here we are. Why am I having this conversation with you? It's because, Robert, I made a commitment to you to being here and doing this interview with you. And that matters to me. It matters that I honor those obligations. In fact, I've never had a day in my entire career working with Gary and Jay that I've acted perfectly in order of priority. I don't know if it exists. The idea here is about having clarity on what your priorities even are. Most people, before we work with them, and I've tested this where I'll say, hey, Robert, and I'm asking rhetorically, but Robert, what are the biggest things that you need to accomplish this year? Just a handful of true priorities, no more than 3 to 5, that if you just accomplish those would make this the most awesome week in your entire professional career. Most people would look back at us and have looked back at us like deer in the headlights. They usually go, great question. The difference is once you start living your one thing, which is our system for doing this, you have absolute clarity. I know I only got 3 things I got to do this week. I have to post the job for my new person. I have to solidify our event dates, and I have to launch our retention process for our membership program. I didn't have to hesitate. I knew it. It was clear. And anything that I do that is not directly allowing me to cross those off in order of priority is a distraction.
By having those 3 things listed, I mean, how does the rest of your week work? Because it sounds like they're just like those 3 quick tasks. So does that mean that you do those quick things before anything else? Or does that mean that if you're out of priority, as you say, it's okay as long as you acknowledge that there are more pressing things? Like how do you reconcile? I mean, it's one thing to say like, okay, really simplify it down, and there's only these couple of things that I need to do. Does that mean those are the only things that you do? Are they always done first? Like how do you reconcile the simplicity with the rest of the week and the rest of the week in real life?
Right. Well, first and foremost, those things are not simple tasks. I mean, posting the job description required, or posting the job required that I finalize the job description, which took 3 revisions and meetings with my partners. It took identifying a missing persons report. It took looking at the market comps for what the salaries were. It took sitting down with our HR to, like, there was a lot of stuff that had to go in to getting that done. So what most people do when they approach their weeks is they look at their calendar. They see everything that's already on there. They look at what else they want to do, and they start scheduling in the time that remains. If somebody asks if you can meet, they just look, and if they see a blank spot, they fill it. That's going through your day, doing all the things that don't matter, hoping to have time to do the things that matter most. The idea here is that you think big and go small. You think big in terms of being the type of person who has clarity on their priorities, the type of person who is in control of their time and acts in order of priority. And then you go really small. You look at where your baseline is today. Most people probably aren't doing it at all. And it's how do you do a little bit better this week? I've been doing this for 2 years, and I'm continuously getting better. I'm still not perfect, noted by the fact that I'm on this interview right now. But I'm constantly asking the question, how do I protect more of my time every week to doing my most important work? And what that looks like is once I get clarity on my priorities, we use a tool called the 411, which you guys can, if you go to theonething.com with the number 1 in the URL and you click on free stuff, you can see what that looks like there. Once I do my 411 on Friday afternoon or Sunday evening, and I have clarity on my priorities, I look at my calendar and I really view it like a blank slate. I interrogate every single appointment that is on there, and about 50% of them get canceled.
Oh, wow.
And I learned that from Gary Keller. Every week, his assistant cancels 50% of his appointments. Those people get the opportunity to reschedule, but make no mistake about it, 50% of his calendar gets cleaned. Now, you might say to yourself, well, Geoff, I can't do that because I'm not Gary Keller. I'll ask you a question. Do you think Gary gets to do that because he's Gary Keller, or is he Gary Keller because he does that?
Awesome.
That's what it looks like.
So when you look at that calendar and you cancel half the meetings, I mean, how do you make those decisions? What makes the cut, and why did I make the cut?
It's really easy. I know what my 3 things are this week. Interviews, like doing this, directly promotes our brand, and it directly supports our number 1 objective for accomplishing our goals this year, which is growing our database. The more people that start listening to the One Thing podcast, the more people that eventually opt into our email list, that grows our database, and that makes everything else easier or unnecessary. That's why we're still having this conversation. It directly supports my number 1 priority for the year, even though it's not my number 1 priority for the week. This week's very 10,000 foot level or just ground level, and the year's business plan is more 40,000 foot. That's why we're having this. There were also a bunch of calls that I had with other people. Those got canceled because it wasn't even close. They did not directly support our long-term objectives, and they were not more important than my priorities for this week.
Interesting.
Remember this, 80-20. 20% of your activities will give you 80% of your results. Where should you be spending or investing your time? In the 20% activities that give you the results, or the 80% activities that don't move the needle?
20%.
Most of the stuff that's on your calendar is 80%ers.
Oh, yeah.
So there you go.
And that's a really good reminder there to kind of like re-examine those activities that you're doing and making sure that they line up with those objectives. I mean, not only to make sure that you're not wasting time, but then that you're excited to do those things. Because I don't know about you, but sometimes if I need to write some document, as you explained, or send some emails or reach out to people, sometimes I don't feel like doing it. But then when I remember, well, what's the point of this? What is this actually going to result in? Then somehow that picks me back up, and that tells me, oh yeah, before I was thinking, well, I have to write some stupid document or some stupid report just like back in school. But now that I say, well, that's going to result in more traffic, more opt-ins, more money, more whatever, then or like, even more simplicity, then I can say, well, okay, that's the end goal, and I know this is the vehicle, so now I'm motivated to actually complete the dang thing.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. And folks, I need to really reinforce this. You may be listening to this and you're either thinking one or two things. Wow, this sounds so simple. Or B, you're thinking like, there's no way I could ever do this. Think big, go small. The focusing question of the book is, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? It's really a profound question. We're going to break it down and then you're going to understand why. What's the one thing? Notice I did not say two things. I did not say three things. One. You only get to pick one thing I can do, not should do. I'll feel guilty if I don't do it, which is how most of us identify our priorities. Oh, I feel like I should do this thing this week, or I'll feel guilty if I don't, but you don't actually have the capacity to do it. We're establishing a bar that you can step over. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, meaning you actually take action? You don't just listen to this podcast and then go on your merry way. You implement what you learned here, novel concept. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? And that's what makes it a big, profound question. It is such a powerful lead domino that by knocking that one down, it makes everything else easier or unnecessary. So think big and then go really small to that little activity that you absolutely can do that's going to make everything else easier or unnecessary. That's where you start.
I love it. So it's like the planning is big, but then when it comes to taking action, you're practical and you're doable. And I love the story about the three things that you tried to list, and they ripped it up and said just do the one thing. And do you have any other, like, as you're writing this down, do you have any like crazy stories like that where someone's thinking was just like totally wrong, and you said you got to trim down, you got to make it simple? Maybe they resisted, but they finally saw the way. Any interesting before and afters like that?
Yeah, fantastic question. I'm so glad you asked that. First and foremost, give me a little context. Majority of the people who are listening to this, who are they?
The majority of the people there's a lot of solopreneurs and people who need to finish more things, need more confidence, need to break out of their shell more.
Cool. So there was a woman that we were working with named Deb, and she's a member of our Living Your One Thing community. And she joined, and she was just so excited. She joined because she really wanted, she's a mother of three. She's got a small business that she's growing from her house. And for years, she's been struggling to grow the business, but just never seeming to break through that ceiling of achievement. And she realized it came down to how she was managing her time. And so she started working with us and Living Your One Thing. And for the first few weeks, she was following the system. She was following the model. She was getting lots of progress. And then life started getting in the way. Suddenly, it wasn't as exciting to do the trainings. It wasn't as exciting to do her 411 and get clarity on her priorities. It became then hard to protect her time blocks. Even though she put stuff on her calendar for her most important work, other stuff just started popping up, and it was urgent. She handled it. And before you know, 3 months have passed. She's completely unengaged from the community, and she decides, why am I still paying for this thing? I should stop. And that's when we got on the phone. And I just asked her, I said, why did you join to begin with? And she said, because I really knew that I was a better way and I deserved this. I need more money for my family. I said, so what's gotten in your way? And she said, everything. And I said, what's the cost of that? What's the cost if 5 years from now you continue doing the things that you've always done them? And she's like, we're going to lose our house. I don't know how I'm going to put food on the table. And then we asked, great, of all the things that you could do, what's the one thing you can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier and necessary? She said, well, scale my business. Okay, what's the one thing you can do to scale your business? And she said, sell more. What's the one thing you can do to sell more? Make more calls. What's the one thing you can do to make more calls? Have a list of the people I want to call. What's the one thing you can do to make sure that you have the list of people you want to call? Write 5 names down before I go to bed. That was her one thing. Big scale business, small. Write down name of 5 people before I go to bed. She then started doing that every single day. And when she had that level of clarity that there was nothing as important as just identifying the names of the people that she needed to call for the next day, her business starts to take off. She starts making more money. All of a sudden, there's more room in the budget every month. And most importantly, she's realizing that her 3 kids are watching her, and they're watching what it means to change your financial circumstances. And suddenly her activities were grounded in purpose. When you do one thing, the right thing, it can topple over many things. You just got to get clear on what that lead domino is and whack away at it until it falls.
That is amazing. The clarity concept and the domino thing, it's beginning to finally make sense to me that, it's easy to let the minutia of life get you off track and get your thinking changed. And sometimes we need to course correct. And not only that, but it sounds like there's a lot of like re-examining goals here. Of it's easy to just, do the regular task every single day. But then if you say, well, what's my goal? Let me pull it back. Well, how do I make it simpler? What do I do before that? Pulling back all the way until you're like, when I wake up tomorrow morning, I have to just start with that, and that'll set off the domino, and that'll lead to everything else to get me on the path. I mean, it's like you take the thinking all the way backwards and all the way forwards, and I mean, I'm beginning to see here how it helps people get the clarity and helps to stop multitasking and just get their head on straight on what's the purpose, what am I doing, are the things that I'm doing important, and just re-examining that on a regular basis. So that way we as life changes or our business changes or our priorities change or whatever, we're being adaptable to what's important, but we're staying on track at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and do I have time to add one more thing? Because this is powerful.
Go for it. Yeah.
Most people have never been taught how to set goals properly, which means that you don't even have the correct target to be aiming at. And here's what we mean. I walked into my partner Jay's office, and he looked at me and said, "Do you know how billionaires set goals?" And I stopped and looked at him and immediately sat down in the chair and just grabbed my pen and looked at him like, "I'm ready. Go ahead." And he gets in front of a whiteboard and he draws a dot in the middle of it. He says, "This is you at this exact moment in time. And if I asked you to trace your steps as to how you got here, you'd think about how you were in medical sales and you and I connected. And before that, you worked for Xerox doing sales. And before that, you were in college. And before that, you were in accounting. When you imagine how you got to where you are here today, you imagine your life up until this point as a series of connected events, a straight line. Here's the challenge. Most people, when they set goals, they ask, what do I want to do this year? They set the goal, and if they're really good, they'll write it down. And if they're even better, they'll work it backwards, like we just did. Here's the problem. It's not a big enough view of time. What billionaires do is they time travel. They imagine their life someday from now, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. They imagine themselves in that moment, standing back and looking at the series of connected events that got them to that someday reality. And when you have clarity on your someday goals, you then get to ask, well, where do I think I could possibly be 5 years from now to feel like I'm on track for the someday? It's not about having absolute clarity. It's about getting a sense, a general direction. I think 5 years from now, I need to be here to be on track for the someday. Based on that, where do I need to be this month or this year to be on track for the 5? And based on that, where do I need to be this month to be on track for the 1? And based on that, what do I need to do this week to be on track for the month? This is something we call goal setting to the now. Which again, if you guys go to thatonething.com and click on the free stuff, there's a kick-ass guide to goal setting that walks you through this whole thing. And that's what drives your 411, because your 411 gives you clarity on your priorities for the year, the month, and the week. And when you have that type of a view of your life, all of a sudden that shiny object that is low-hanging fruit, easy money, you suddenly realize that that's a deviation from your course. And over time, that takes you to a very different destination. And suddenly saying no to the shiny objects becomes incredibly easy, and you become laser focused on your one thing.
Super awesome. I mean, I love all of it. I think that this makes perfect sense, especially as we think about the things that led us here. Sometimes it took those took the ups and downs and ignoring the temptations, the bright shiny objects in order to get to where we're at. So that makes perfect sense that something that might seem like a quick fix or an upside now could take us off our journey, and we need to have this better strategy of setting the big goal and working way backwards, so that way we're sure that we stay on track. And this tool that you mentioned sounds amazing. So the number and then the numeral one thing.com. So the one thing.com to grab that tool. And are there any other resources or links that you want to mention here, Geoff, or is it just the one thing.com is the place to be?
Yeah, that's the website. Our podcast is The One Thing, all spelled out, the ONE thing, and that's also the title of the book. And then I mentioned the membership that we have. If you go to theonething.com/membership, you can learn more about living your one thing. But that's where we really get to be your accountability partners and getting results. And the average person takes back control of 20% of their time in the first 30 days. So
can you
not too shabby.
Yeah, I agree. Not too shabby at all. So can you give us a little more details about what this membership is exactly?
Yeah, we looked up and we asked what our people's biggest challenges were with time, and it was really three things. They lack clarity. Clarity on what their purpose is, clarity on what their goals really are, clarity on what their priorities are. So they lack clarity first and foremost. Second, they lack control. They go through the day feeling like they have to say yes, feeling like they have to get to inbox zero, feeling like they have to attend meetings. They're not in control of their time. And finally, they lack a community that supports their goals. A community that understands if I'm saying no to attending that meeting, it's because there's truly something more important that's going to serve everybody at a higher level. And we decided, how can we create that type of an ecosystem where we can help you get more clarity, help you take back more control, and literally thrust you into a community that supports your goals. And that's what it does.
Well, sounds like an amazing resource. So everyone needs to go to theonething.com to check out that podcast and that membership. And thanks for just making things simple and easy for us, and maybe metaphorically smacking us upside the head and setting us straight, because there's like those things, my best thinking got me here. And then the thing of like, if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm going to get the same results. So if I'm not happy where I'm at, or if I continue in this direction and that's going to lead me to a place I don't want to be, maybe it's time to shake things up and change the direction and try new things and have a different way of thinking, different way of getting organized. And the One Thing book, podcast, and membership is the perfect resource, or perfect resources, for anyone out there who feels like you're stressed out, running out of time, making things too simple, if things are tougher than they have to be, burned out, you name it. You need to get your productivity, your mindset right. So make sure to head on over to theonething.com. Check out what Geoff and his partners and his company have for you, and you'll be glad you did. We'll see you over at theonething.com. And thanks, Geoff, for stopping by and just dumping a ton of great knowledge on us, making things really easy to understand. Great stories, all of it. I love it. So thanks for doing it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Today's episode is sponsored by doneforyoupodcasting.com. Is your podcast not what it should be? What if you could simply show up and have a team deal with content, outreach for guests, editing, production, social media traffic, and more? Check out doneforyoupodcasting.com.